Hi, everybody. Dr. White here, the founder of the Business Analysis Doctor. So today we're going to be talking about how to know what questions to ask during requirements gathering and elicitation. But before we get started, go ahead and subscribe to the page and like the video if you find it helpful. So I recently got a request to make a video about the questions that I ask during requirements elicitation. And the truth is, there's no magic list of questions to ask whenever you're eliciting requirements because every situation is so unique. However, there is a framework that I use that I learned a long time ago, and I found it to be quite helpful. And that framework is the 5 W's and an H framework. I originally learned about this framework in the book Request for Software Development, which I'll include in the link in the description below. However, I've made some tweaks to the framework in order to derive a more rich set of questions. Now, this might seem like a pretty basic approach to eliciting requirements. However, the key to optimizing this framework is to adjust the framework based on the category of the requirements you're eliciting. So the typical framework for the 5 W's and an H includes who, what, where, when, why, and how. Now, when you're eliciting requirements, the three key requirements categories include business requirements, stakeholder requirements, and solution requirements. Now, your business requirements identify why we're making this change. These are generally represented in the form of goals, objectives, and outcomes. Now, your stakeholder requirements, these identify what the users need to do in order to support the business requirements. And in an agile environment, these usually come in the form of user stories. Now, solution requirements can be broken down into two subsets, including functional and non-functional. Solution requirements generally represent what the system needs to do or how the system needs to behave in order to support the stakeholder requirements. And in Agile, these might look like acceptance criteria. So let's dig further into this. Level 1 is where we'll apply the framework to the business requirements category. The business requirements focus on trying to understand why the change needs to be made. So in the business requirements category, the framework might ask the following questions. Why does a change need to be made? This will help identify the problem or the opportunity. Now, when you're asking why, you may want to pair this framework with the 5 Whys framework in order to dig down deep in order to identify the true purpose of the change. What are we trying to achieve? This is where you're going to derive your goals, objectives, and outcomes for the change. Who are the stakeholders? This is where you're going to identify your organizations that are involved, the business areas, customers, external stakeholders, and anyone else who might be impacted by the overall change. Where will the change take place? Now, this question may be more or less complicated depending on the overall structure of the organization and whether or not the stakeholders are geographically dispersed or all in the same location. When does the change need to happen? This will allow you to create time-bound goals and objectives for the initiative. How? How do we measure success? This will allow you to identify whether or not the needs have been met once the change has been completed. Now, after you've used the framework to build your business requirements, you'll use that information to collect relevant documents such as organizational processes, maps, procedures, and any other document that's relevant to the change. And you'll review those in order to stimulate more questions that'll allow you to think of more rich and relevant questions to ask during your next round of elicitation. Okay, for level 2, we'll be applying the framework to the stakeholder requirements category. So here you'll be fleshing out a more refined stakeholder list, and you'll also be trying to determine what the stakeholder groups need to do in order to support those business requirements. Now, you'll use the questions during your current state analysis as you're doing a activity such as shadowing, observation, or an operational walkthrough in order to gain more context. Then you'll ask another round of the questions in order to identify your ideal future state. For stakeholder requirements, you might ask the following questions. What? What processes and systems are impacted by this initiative? What data and information is required? What applications are used? Why? Why are these processes and systems performed? Who? Who are the contributors to these processes and systems? And who are the receivers of the deliverables for these processes and systems? Where? Where do these processes and systems take place? Or where do the outputs and deliverables live? When? When do these processes and systems take place? When do they occur? When does the output for these processes and systems expire? How? How are these processes and systems executed? These are the exact steps and activities involved. Or you could ask, how are the deliverables used by the receivers? Now, it's usually a best practice to prepare these questions in advance in the form of an interview guide or questionnaire in order to give the stakeholders as much time as possible to prepare and provide as much quality information as possible. And if it's feasible, you can even request that the stakeholders provide the answers back to you via email. That way, you can use the elicitation session time to ask for clarification or to further probe on the initial questions that you were asking before. Okay, so at level 3, we'll be applying the framework to the solution requirements. So once the stakeholder requirements have been defined, they'll need to be decomposed into a good set of solution requirements. And again, in Agile, this might look like acceptance criteria. Now, the solution requirements communicate what the system needs to do functionally or how it needs to perform in order to enable the stakeholder requirements. So the questions that you would ask during stakeholder requirements category includes the following. What? What does the system need to do, or what does the system need to display? You might also ask, what is the sequence of functional activities? Why? Why is this functionality needed? This will help determine the value of that requirement. Who? Who needs or is impacted by this functionality? Where? Where does the functionality occur? Or where does this functionality fall in the larger set of requirements? When? When does this functionality occur? When is it triggered? Or when does the functionality end? And how? How is the functionality initiated? And how do we know that the functionality has been completed? So you can use this framework to decompose each functional and non-functional requirement down to the most atomic level so that you can ensure that the requirement is fully understood and represented in the requirement set. Well, there you have it, folks. That is the framework that I use to ask the right questions during requirements elicitation. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below and I'll be sure to get back with you. And also, be sure to check out all of the resources available to you at thebadoc.com. That's thebadoc.com. I hope you have a productive and prosperous week, and I wish you the best. Until next time, bye now.